Hi, this is Dan Korver, pastor here at Dalton Hill Baptist Church. We're a small Baptist church located in Owasso, Oklahoma. We're small enough to know you, but we're big enough to serve you and for you to serve as well. Our vision is to rescue, restore, and return to service. Rescue a non-believer or a believer who has been hurt or is lost, restoring them to Christ in fellowship with other believers with the desire that they in turn will help others along their way. The lady who actually started Memorial Day was Frances Ann Williams. She started that in 1893. She put in New York. She decorated both Union and Confederate graves, and then moved on to obviously, to all the states. And you may not have realized it didn't actually become official to the last Monday in May until 1968, and it wasn't actually a national holiday until 1971. So a lot of us just think it's always been that way. It hasn't always been that way. Let me give you a couple of people. You're going to wonder how in the world they relate. I'll try to make them relate. How many of you ever heard of a guy by the name of Easy Eddie? Easy Eddie? I think you will once I start telling you about him. Easy Eddie was in real estate and as a lawyer in St. Louis. He started doing business with Al Capone in Chicago. Easy Eddie had 3 kids, and he left, divorced. He and his wife divorced, and she didn't like Chicago, and he became Al Capone's lawyer. He's the one that kept getting Al Capone off of everything. But there's one thing that Easy Eddie really cared about. He had an entire mansion. He had an entire square block of real estate, gated community, everything in Chicago at that time. But one thing he really cared about was his family, especially his son. He tried to protect him from everything. But he thought, what can I give him? I don't have a good name. He can't respect my name. He can't respect what I do. He's the one that went to the IRS, or actually went and started turning in Al Capone and told them how they could arrest him, how they could get through and get the books, and how they could do all that. He's the one that also, in fact, he was even, if you look at The Untouchables, he's even in the movie. But you look at it. So here's how he was doing it. And he also was the one that told the judge that Al Capone had bought off the juror. And just before the trial started, which I didn't know they could do this, the 2 judges switched jury pools. And so Al Capone was convicted. And obviously there's a great cost when you do something like that. And he then, when he was driving home from work, the car comes by and guns come out and killed him. And no arrest, no witnesses. Of course, pretty much everybody knows as to who was behind it. Well, then there's also a young man by the name of Butch. Butch was in the military, and he was a natural at flying, and he went to training school. In fact, when he was in it, the trainer got into a dogfight with him the very first time, and he beat the trainer on how to do the dogfights of World War II when it was just getting started. And Butch then was stationed, and while he was returning back, his different reports running out of fuel. Didn't have enough fuel. He couldn't continue on the mission with his squadron. So he and another one returned. His person with him, his guns were jammed. While they're coming back to the Lexington, they look out, and in front of them are 8 Japanese planes flying to, torpedo and wipe out his ship. He's the only one that has any ammunition. There's 8 of them. He comes from a top, attacks, and he wipes out within a 5-minute period of time. He wiped our 4-minute period of time and used up all his ammunition. He shot down 5 of the planes. And his counterpart was trying to maneuver, trying to get fire. And he also got fire even from his own ship. But they all witnessed all of it from the Lexington. They could see all what was taking place. A year later, while they started night flights for the very first time, he was shot down. Butch was shot down, and so was his counterpart. They don't know for sure. A lot of suspect that it was either a stray bullet from the Japanese or was it friendly fire. It's awful hard that early, and at night and so on to understand. If you remember, he was originally from St. Louis, but Chicago wanted to honor him because of what all he'd done. By the way, FDR, he wanted good news. Butch became the very first naval ace, and he was given the award. Chicago wanted to honor him. So how would you honor him? What was Easy Eddie's last name? O'Hare. What's Butch's last name?
O'Hare.
And the airport is named after? O'Hare Airport. So you never know, but notice the cost of doing it and the memorial that you have. And today, if you go between Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, you'll see the replica of his plane and the tribute to Butch, what you have. So let's just think about that, just sacrifices. We go just quickly through a few things when you think of memorial. One, obviously, the sacrifice Jesus made in Luke 22, remember, which we'll have the Lord's Supper next week. But if you think about it, he says, this is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me. Same thing in 1 Corinthians 11. You have the Lord's Supper. And so when you think about it, it was a choice. It was also a choice that both of them made, Eddie as well as his son. Because he could very well have said no. Because the chances of surviving, when you go into the middle of 8 other planes and so on and come out, without being killed. It was a choice, it was a cost, there was consequences. There's also, then you stop and think about a challenge. Have you and I been bought with a price? We have been. And how many of us are taking up our cross daily to follow him? There is a sacrifice. So obviously, what sacrifice am I being asked to do? And I think, what am I willing? And do we recognize others? We mentioned a few here. Most of you are familiar with the cemetery that's right over here off of 76. You think back, how many of you ever went through there? I don't think it's being done anymore, but used to see at least 100 little white crosses all put in the ground out there. Who made those? Who put them out? Henry Ramsey did, who was a member here. He made them all and he painted them all, and he and Stan went out there and put them in the ground. Well, you think about it, they're in their 70s and going on 80. Knee replacements, everything. If anybody had an excuse not to go out there and try to bend down and put one of those things in, they did. But Henry was so proud of it, wanted me to come out and look, and he would be out there, and he'd put them all out in straight rows, pick them all up and store them. But that was his commitment to his fallen comrades that he had. But besides that, what about service? You stop and you think, we've talked about service that had been mentioned. It's interesting when you look at 2 Samuel, you don't have to turn there, I'll give it because most of you know, chapter 23, right before David's death, King David, he first had a poem in the first 7 verses, and he's remembering, first of all, that the reason he was able to do what he was able to do was because of God. But then in verse 8 down through verse 39, he remembers his mighty men. He couldn't have got there without his mighty men. In fact, 1 Chronicles 11 said 3 of them in particular, his 3 greatest warriors, on one particular battle led him to it. And you look at what those mighty men did, it's pretty amazing. Defeating an entire one man, killing 100 men in one battle, or 800 men in one battle. Fighting bears, fighting you name it. It's just amazing, the warriors there. But if they weren't mentioned in Scripture by David, because of the Holy Spirit, how many of us would have ever known anything about it? So you stop. What about you and I? Where are we today, and who are we thanking and remembering from where we're at today, and because of what they've done? And you stop and you think about it. And you look at it. They're from different tribes. You remember one of his mighty men was from Benjamin, tribe of Benjamin. Well, who was the king before him? So notice they were trying to create their own, and he was on. David fought the Amorites. He had mighty men that were from the Amorites. The Hittites. He had one of his, Uriah the Hittite. He had all the different ones. But do you ever look at where they came from originally? Where did these mighty men come from? According to 1 Samuel 22 and verse 2, he said, all those who were in debt, distressed, and discontent joined David. Well, that sounds like a great team to lead. A bunch of misfits. And look at what they became. Because David's leadership. So I think how many of us are recognizing and recording those who've helped us? We have the Andrew Memorial Highway out here. We have the Memorial Day we're celebrating. You have Memorial Day, Lincoln and Jefferson Memorial. You have different things. You have holidays we're remembering. We have airports we're remembering people. But what are you and I doing to help remember the people who've served us? So you have one is that of sacrifice, another is that of service. But then you also have the stones or monuments. You ever look in Joshua chapter 4? After they crossed the Jordan, he says, go and do what? Put stones in the river. Now, why would you put stones in the river? You're only going to see them at certain times, depending on the elevation of the river. But then they also, in verse 20, were told to take stones from the Jordan River and put them up on land further in. And says so that whenever their children ask, what are these stones here for? You can say what God did for you today. So what are we doing, and what are we remembering people for what they've done? You stop and you think about it. I mentioned that we have the morals, I've already mentioned. You have photo albums. How have you ever pull out photo albums? We do it through names. What's the name of your oldest son, Grady? Named after? Okay. Named after Uncle X. Why did Hagar name her son Ishmael? What does Ishmael mean? What place did she do it at? And what was it named? What was the well? The God who hears and the God who sees. Those places were renamed, and her son was named because, by the way, it would be hard to do too. God said, go back to Sarah, who's treated you poorly, and submit to her. And so here you have a God who hears and a God who sees, but you're probably saying what? If you're Hagar, God, you don't hear me and you don't see, you don't know what in the world's going on. But it does. So I want you to stop and think about that. You also have days, which we are celebrating at festivals. You have in Exodus 12, Passover every year. You have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. What about the Feast of Purim in Esther? Celebrating the victory that you had then. We have it too, whether it's July 4th or whatever day it might be. You have different celebrations. But what days are we remembering? And who are we remembering? Think about it. We also have songs. We already saw some of the backgrounds you have here. You have Moses' song and Miriam's song in Exodus 15. You have the Colossians 3 to singing and making melody, teaching one another through psalms, hymns, and spiritual song. So many of these songs that we sing, when you look at the background and what they're actually saying, tremendous teaching that you have. Why do so many kids, why do you learn when you're young all the songs? And you can remember them that many years later. Music is a great instrument, a great tool for teaching. Really ministers to people's heart. And I think it's interesting, by the way, you think of one song that's interesting. By the way, it was learned by both Israel and the Philistines. What song made Saul so mad? The women sang and played on their instruments. Saul has killed his thousands. David has killed his... Twice it said the Philistines do the same song and said David is said of David. It already went all the way to the Philistines and they knew the song. You ever think about how songs and where they can go? How they start off and where they might go. I think it's interesting. We've already saw It's Well With My Soul that Jesse did a great job doing. In the background that we have on it, The Anchor Holds, the great background of the song that we have with that. But then also I think, what about showing? How many of us are showing that we really care about people who've gone before us, a memorial and so on? You have Jesus told us, if you love me, you will do what? Keep my commandments. By this shall all men know you're my disciples, if you have what? love one for another. I was asking Charlie earlier, because I always liked Jack Nicklaus. I always thought he was the greatest golfer of all time. But I remember watching him, especially on Sunday, he would wear yellow. I thought it was just because he was the golden bear and yellow looked good on him. That isn't why Jack Nicklaus wore yellow. Why did Jack Nicklaus wear yellow? There was a doctor friend who had a son. His name was Craig. And he was dying of cancer. And Jack asked him, "What's your favorite color?" And he said, "Yellow." So Jack Nicklaus wore yellow in memory of Craig. And that's when he would wear it, especially when he was in contention. And when he won in '86, when he won the Masters at 46 years of age, he was wearing yellow. And the dad said, "I knew as soon as I turned the TV on and saw you in yellow, you were saying a signal or remembering my son who had passed away." And we still have a tribute they're even paying today. How much are we even aware of that kind of thing? How are we showing people that we care? And I think it's important. And I think the last one you stop and you think about it would be that of storing up. We have a book of remembrance. We have a book of remembrance in Malachi. God remembers. It says, he tells us in Revelation 22:15, he's coming back and bringing his reward with him to reward to all those who have done it. God remembers. How well are we remembering all those who have helped us get along the way? And we need to thank them. I think especially as people get older and they can't get out, they often will think, I really do not, what purpose do I have? Did it make any difference? We can really help telling them and showing them that they really did make a difference. So let's think about that when we do it. So we have, like I said, you have the sacrifice, service, you have stones, you have song, how are we showing it? And then we are storing up. We're told to lay up treasures in heaven in Matthew 6 are we not? What are we storing up? Is he going to say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant"? We'd love for you to come and visit with us and fellowship with us. We're located at 8263 North Owasso Expressway, which is on the east side of Highway 169 North, between 76th and 86th Street North. We have coffee and fellowship from 8:30 to 9 Sundays, followed by Sunday school for all ages from 9 to 9:45, and our Sunday morning worship service is from 10 to 11. We likewise have a Wednesday night service for all ages from 7 to 8. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times, and in every way the Lord be with you all the time.